I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood in the hallway outside the kitchen door holding a grocery bag from Kroger and listened to my daughter-in-law tell my son exactly what she thought of me. She's draining us, Nathan. Every single month. The grocery bill, the utilities, the doctor copays. Do you know what her prescriptions cost last month? $300. $300 that came out of our account. I heard my son shift in his chair, the sound of his coffee mug hitting the counter. She's my mother, Kristen. She's a burden. Her voice didn't even waver. I'm sorry, but that's what she is. I didn't sign up to run a nursing home in my own house. I have 2 kids, Nathan. 2 kids who need things, who deserve things. And every time I turn around, your mother is there, needing something else. I stood very still. What are you saying? I'm saying she needs to find somewhere else to live. A senior apartment. A facility. I don't care. But not here. Not in my house. There was a long silence. I counted the seconds. I got to 11 before my son said, "Okay, I'll talk to her." Just like that. I walked back to my room. Not the guest room. They'd stopped calling it that after the first year. Just your room. As if I were a piece of furniture they'd rearranged and forgotten about. I sat on the edge of the bed. The grocery bag was still in my hand. Inside, a rotisserie chicken, a bag of green beans, a half-gallon of milk. I had bought dinner for all of us. I set the bag on the floor and opened my laptop. I want to tell you something about the moment your own child chooses someone else over you. It doesn't feel the way you think it will. There's no dramatic collapse, no wailing. It feels more like stepping off a curb you didn't see. That sudden drop. That moment of free fall. And then you hit the ground and you just go very quiet inside. I had been quiet inside for a while now. I just hadn't known it. My name is Audrey. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as an elementary school librarian in a suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. I raised my son on my own after my husband passed from a stroke when Nathan was 14. I worked 2 jobs for 4 years to keep our house. I made sure Nathan had new shoes every fall and a birthday cake every March and a mother who showed up. I retired 2 years ago. Sold the house. My plan had been to travel, not extravagantly, just the kind of traveling a librarian does. Road trips, national parks, maybe a week in Savannah. But 3 months after I retired, I got the diagnosis. Type 2 diabetes, advancing fast. Neuropathy in both feet. My doctor sat across from me and said the word management more times than I could count. And what I heard underneath all of it was, "You cannot live alone right now." Nathan called me every Sunday. When I told him, his voice broke a little. He said, "Mom, come stay with us. We have the space. We want you here." I believed him. That's the part I keep coming back to. I believed him completely. I moved into their house in Clarksville, Tennessee on a Tuesday in September. Kristen had painted the guest room a color called Misty Sage and bought new towels from Target. She hugged me at the door. She seemed genuinely happy, or at least genuinely willing. I told myself that whatever happened next, she had tried. For the first few months, things were fine. Not warm exactly, but functional. I helped with the kids after school, my grandson Eli, who was 8, and my granddaughter Maya, who was 6. I read to them. I helped with homework. I made dinner 3 or 4 nights a week because I needed to feel useful and because Kristen worked long hours at the dental office and came home exhausted. I tried to stay out of the way, but I was always there. That was the problem, I think. There is no version of a mother-in-law that disappears completely, and after a while, my presence, even a quiet, careful presence, started to wear on Kristen the way a dripping faucet wears on you. You stop hearing it consciously and start feeling it as a low-grade irritation you can't quite name. She stopped asking me to join them for movie night. She started making grocery lists that didn't account for my dietary restrictions. Small things. The kind of things you can't bring up without sounding paranoid or petty. The kind of things that accumulate in silence. Nathan noticed but didn't say anything. That was its own kind of answer. I'd been managing my diabetes carefully, eating right, monitoring my blood glucose, making every appointment. But the neuropathy meant I couldn't drive long distances anymore, and my follow-up appointments were 40 minutes away. Nathan took me twice. After that, Kristen started driving me because Nathan's work schedule was complicated, and she did it without complaint, but I could feel what it cost her. The tight set of her jaw, the way she'd answer her phone in the waiting room as soon as we arrived, as if she'd been holding her breath for an excuse to step away. The appointment where everything changed was on a Wednesday in February. My doctor adjusted my insulin dosage and referred me to a specialist. She also mentioned, gently, that I might benefit from a wound care visit. There was a small ulcer on my left foot that needed attention. Nothing alarming, she said, but something to stay on top of. I didn't know that Kristen had heard this. I thought she was in the waiting room, but she'd come back in, quietly, just as my doctor was finishing. On the drive home, she said nothing. She had her sunglasses on. Her hands were very still on the wheel. I watched the Tennessee hills roll by and thought about what I needed to pick up at the pharmacy. That night, I heard her. She didn't know the heating vent in my room connected directly to the kitchen. I had noticed it in October, when I'd heard Eli drop a bowl of cereal at 6 in the morning. I had never told anyone. That evening, I was lying down after dinner when their voices came up through the floor like smoke. "Wound care," Kristen's voice, clipped. "Do you know what wound care costs? Even with your insurance, we're going to be paying for that out of pocket. We'll manage it. We've been managing it, Nathan, for 1.5 years. I am so tired of managing it. She's sick. I know she's sick. That's the problem. She's sick, and she's not going to get better. And we are going to be doing this forever. Is that what you want? Is that the plan? Because nobody asked me what the plan was." My son's voice was lower. I had to strain. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to find her somewhere else to go. An assisted living place. A senior apartment. Something. I am not her caretaker, Nathan. This is not what our house is for. She has nowhere else to go. Then she'll have to figure something out." A pause. "I mean it. I am done. I cannot keep doing this." Silence again. "I'll look into some options," my son said. That was it. That was the moment. Not a single word about what I'd given up to come here. Not a single word about the 2 children I was watching every afternoon so they didn't have to pay for aftercare. Not one word. I lay on my back in the dark and stared at the ceiling and felt that quiet inside me go very, very deep. I did not cry. I opened my laptop. Here is something people don't know about librarians. We are excellent researchers. We are also, by nature, planners. We think about systems. We think about contingencies. We think about what happens when the book you need isn't on the shelf and you have to find another way to get it. I had actually been thinking about my finances for months. Not because I'd anticipated this. I want to be clear about that. But because I was 67 years old and diabetic and practical. And it is foolish to be practical about everything in your life except the thing that matters most. After my husband passed, I received his life insurance, $240,000. I didn't touch most of it. I kept working, kept our house, and invested carefully. When I sold the house in Columbus, I cleared $160,000 after fees. Between the investments, the sale, and my pension from the school district, I had been sitting on just over $400,000. I had never told Nathan the exact figure. Not because I was hiding it, but because I had learned, slowly, over the years, that money changes the way people treat you. Not always, but sometimes. I also had not updated my will since moving to Clarksville. That night, I started a list. I found a senior independent living community called Meadow Ridge, about 12 miles from Clarksville. Not a nursing home. I want to be clear about the distinction, because it mattered to me enormously. Independent living for active seniors, a 1-bedroom apartment, fitness center, a community garden, a library with 2,000 books, a shuttle to grocery stores and medical appointments 3 days a week. The monthly cost was $2,200, which I could cover comfortably. I contacted them by email that same night and scheduled a tour. I also made an appointment with a financial advisor in Nashville. And then, quietly, I called my sister in Asheville. My sister Vera is 71. We had not been close for years. Not from any falling out, just the ordinary drift of two people living separate lives in separate states. But when I called her at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night and said, "I need to talk," she answered on the second ring. I told her everything. She was silent for a long time when I finished. "Audrey," she said, "how long have you been sitting with this?" "Long enough. Are you okay?" I thought about it. "I will be." Over the next 3 weeks, I moved very carefully. I went on the tour of Meadow Ridge and put down a deposit. I met with my financial advisor and restructured my accounts, consolidating, organizing, making sure everything was clean and clearly directed. I called my attorney in Columbus, a woman named Janet who had drafted my original will, and scheduled a phone consultation to revise it. I did all of this without saying a word to Nathan or Kristen. I want to explain why, because I think it matters. I was not doing it out of spite. I was not trying to punish anyone. I was doing what I should have done from the beginning, taking care of myself, by myself, the way I had always done before I made the mistake of believing I didn't have to anymore. My son came to my room on a Thursday evening. He knocked. He had the decency to knock. "Mom, can we talk?" He sat in the chair by the window. I sat on the bed. He looked at his hands for a moment and then at me, and I could see that he was not comfortable, but I could also see that he had decided and that the decision had already been made before he walked through the door. "This isn't working," he said. "The arrangement, it's been really hard on Kristen, on both of us, and I think we need to talk about finding you somewhere else, somewhere where you'd have more support." He used the word support 4 times. I counted. "I've already found somewhere," I said. He blinked. "What?" "I've put a deposit on an apartment at Meadow Ridge. I move in 6 weeks. He stared at me. "Mom, when did you? I've been planning it for a few weeks." "I don't understand. I mean, can you afford that?" And there it was, that question. The one that told me everything I needed to know about what he thought of me. "I'll be fine, Nathan." He tried to say something else. About how they hadn't meant for it to go this way. About how he hoped things wouldn't change between us. I listened. I nodded where it seemed appropriate. When he was done, I said, "I appreciate you coming to talk to me. I'll let you know if I need help with anything on moving day." He left looking more unsettled than when he'd arrived. I don't think he'd expected that. I think he had expected tears, or anger, or some version of me that needed to be managed. He had forgotten who I was. Kristen came to me 2 days later. I was in the kitchen making tea when she appeared in the doorway in her work clothes, her lanyard still around her neck. She looked like she hadn't slept well. "Can I sit down?" I gestured to the chair across from me. She sat. She folded her hands on the table. She said, "I want to apologize." I waited. I know things have been tense, and I know I haven't always made you feel welcome. I'm sorry for that. I was overwhelmed and I handled it poorly. It was a real apology. I could hear that. She meant parts of it. But I also knew that she was relieved, enormously, deeply relieved, that I was leaving. The apology and the relief existed at the same time, and one didn't cancel out the other. "I appreciate you saying that," I told her. She nodded. Then she asked, carefully, "Nathan said you have a place lined up already." "At Meadow Ridge?" "That's right. That's a nice community. I've heard good things." A pause. Will you be comfortable there? Financially?" There it was again. That question, asked in a different way, by a different person, with the same undercurrent running beneath it. "I'll be just fine," I said. "Thank you for asking." I moved into Meadow Ridge on a Saturday in April. Vera drove down from Asheville with her husband Roy to help. We rented a small truck and moved my things, the furniture I'd brought from Columbus, my books, my mother's rocking chair. And by 7 o'clock that evening, I was sitting in my own apartment, in my own chair, with a cup of tea that I had made myself in my own kitchen. Vera sat across from me and we were quiet for a while. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Like breathing," I said. The apartment was smaller than the room I'd had at Nathan's house. That's the part that surprised me. How much that didn't matter. The space was mine. Every corner of it. The quiet was mine. The morning light coming through the east window was mine. I could eat dinner at 5 or 9, sleep with the television on, leave my books on every surface, and no one would sigh or rearrange or leave the particular kind of silence that means you are inconvenient. I had not realized how much of my energy had been going toward being as small as possible, toward taking up the least amount of room in someone else's life. I slept 12 hours that first night, deeply, without interruption. I woke up, and my first thought was not about whether I was in the way. My medical care actually improved. The shuttle took me to my appointments. The community nurse did my wound care follow-up twice a week for the first month, at no additional cost. It was included in the monthly fee. My blood sugar stabilized. My doctor, at my next appointment, said the word progress and meant it. I made friends. That surprised me too. There was a woman named, well, I called her Ginny, though her given name was Virginia, who had retired from the Postal Service and knew every bird species in Tennessee by call. There was a retired judge who played chess in the common room every Tuesday and told stories that made me cry laughing. There was a whole life here, ordinary and human and mine, and I had almost missed it entirely because I had believed for a moment that needing help meant surrendering yourself. It was June when things shifted with Nathan. Not dramatically. That's another thing they don't tell you, that the most significant changes usually don't arrive with trumpets. They arrive quietly, like rain you didn't notice starting. Nathan called on a Sunday, as he always had, but the call was different, shorter. He mentioned, offhandedly, that Kristen had taken on extra hours at the dental office, that things were tight. I said I was glad she had the opportunity. He paused. "Are you doing okay at Meadow Ridge?" "I'm doing very well," I said. "I've joined a book club." Another pause. "That's great, Mom." He called the following Sunday, too, and the one after that. The calls got longer. He started asking questions he hadn't asked in years, about the books I was reading, about what I'd been doing, about Vera. Once, in August, he said, "I think I made a mistake, Mom," about how things went. I let that sit for a moment. "I think you are in a hard position," I said, "and I think you'll make different choices next time." That was all I said. Not because I wasn't still hurt. I was, and I think some part of me would be for a long time. But because I had decided, somewhere around my second week at Meadow Ridge, that I was not going to spend the years I had left managing my pain for other people's comfort. And I was also not going to spend them keeping score. I had revised my will the week before I moved. I want to say that plainly, without drama, because that's how it happened. Plainly, practically, without drama. I had reallocated what I was leaving to Nathan to ensure that certain things were protected differently. I had set aside money for Eli and Maya in education trusts, for them, directly, because they were children and had not chosen anything that happened. What Nathan and Kristen did with their portion was their own matter. Nathan didn't know this. Kristen didn't know this. I wasn't going to announce it. That was not the point. The point was that I had made my choices clearly and cleanly, in the light of day, with full use of my mind and my resources, and I had done it for myself. Not as revenge, not as a message, not as leverage, just as the final act of a woman who had spent 31 years making sure everyone else was taken care of, and had finally, at 67, started doing the same for herself. It was October when Kristen called me directly. She had never done that before. It was always through Nathan. She said she had been thinking about our conversation in the kitchen. She said she wasn't sure she'd been fully honest in her apology. She said, and her voice was careful, measured, the way voices get when someone is saying something they've rehearsed, but also mean, "I think I was afraid of how much you needed, and I took that fear out on you, and that wasn't right. I appreciated it. I told her so. I'd like to try again, she said. Not the living situation. I understand that's done, but with you and me, as family. I thought about Eli and Maya, about Sunday dinners, about the particular kind of loneliness that comes from choosing pride over people. I'd like that too, I said. She exhaled. I could hear all the tension leaving her at once. Thank you, Audrey. Of course, I said. And then, because it was true, I'm easy to find. Come have coffee sometime. She did come. The following Saturday, she sat at my small kitchen table and looked around at my apartment and my books and my mother's rocking chair, and she said without quite meaning to, "This is really nice." Yes, I said, it is. We drank coffee. We talked about the kids, about her work, about a television show we had both apparently been watching without knowing it. It was not effortless. There were still edges, still pauses where the wrong thing almost came out, but it was real. It was two people trying, which is all any of us can really offer each other. I don't know how this part of my life ends. I don't know what the next year holds, or the year after. My neuropathy hasn't gone away. My insulin regimen is part of my morning the way coffee is, a permanent ritual, a daily fact. My left foot still sometimes reminds me that I am not 25 or 40 or even the 58 I sometimes still feel like on a good day. But I know this. I wake up every morning in an apartment that is mine. I make my own tea. I sit by the east window with a book while the light comes in. I go to my book club on Thursdays and play Scrabble badly with Ginny on Fridays. My grandchildren come on the second Sunday of every month, and we make pancakes and read in the rocking chair, and they have never once asked me if I'm in the way. I have a full life, a small one in some measurements, but completely unmistakably mine. And if there is something I want to say to you, if you are somewhere in the middle of what I was in the middle of, lying in the dark, listening to your own family through a vent, waiting for someone to choose you, it is this: don't wait for them. Not because they're bad people. Some of them are, and some of them aren't, and most of them are somewhere in the complicated middle. But because you have been waiting long enough, because the life that fits you is still out there, waiting to be arranged, because you have more resources, more strength, more options, more self than they have let you believe. You know how to take care of people. You have spent a lifetime proving it. It is not too late to take care of yourself. I've thought a lot about what made that night different from all the other nights I lay awake in that house. It wasn't the cruelty of what Kristen said, though it was cruel. It wasn't even that Nathan agreed, though that's the part that still sits heaviest when I let myself feel it. What made that night different was that I stopped waiting. Something shifted, very quietly, the way things shift when you finally run out of a patience you didn't know had a limit. And I stopped waiting for someone else to decide what my life was going to look like. I think about Kristen sometimes, and I try to be fair to her. She was overwhelmed. She had 2 small children and a demanding job and a husband who had inherited from me, I think, a tendency to go quiet when things get hard. She said things she shouldn't have said, but I also think she'd been thinking them for a long time, and the real problem wasn't the words. It was that Nathan heard them and chose silence. That's the part that taught me something I hadn't wanted to learn about my son, and about myself, for staying somewhere I wasn't wanted and calling it gratitude. There's a thing that happens when you spend decades taking care of other people. You start to believe that needing is a weakness, that asking is an imposition, that the way to earn your place in someone's life is to shrink yourself small enough that you stop taking up room. I did that for 31 years as a mother, and then I walked into my son's house and kept doing it, even when it was clear that smaller was never going to be small enough. What I know now is that taking care of yourself is not the opposite of caring for others. It is the foundation of it. You cannot pour from a life that has been steadily, quietly emptied out. And the moment I started making my own plan, finding Meadow Ridge, calling my attorney, calling Vera, was the moment I started filling back up. The choices we make do come back to us, not in some tidy or poetic way, but in the plain arithmetic of consequence. Kristen's choice to treat me as a cost to be managed rather than a person to be known left her, eventually sitting across from me in a small apartment, working to rebuild something she had been careless with. Nathan's choice to go quiet when I needed him to speak cost him years of closeness with his mother that he is still, slowly, trying to earn back. And my choice to plan carefully, to leave with dignity, to protect my own future without making it a weapon, gave me back something I hadn't had since before my husband died. A life that was mine. A self that was intact. I'm not interested in scoring points. I'm not telling this story so that anyone will be angry on my behalf, though I understand if you are. I'm telling it because I spent too long believing that the only options were endurance or explosion, that you either stay and suffer or leave in a way that burns everything down. What I found in those quiet weeks of planning was a third thing. You can leave with your whole self. You can take your resources, your dignity, and your future, and you can walk out a door without slamming it. Eli and Maya still come every second Sunday. We make pancakes. We read in the rocking chair. They don't know any of what happened, and they won't, not from me. What they will know, because I intend to show them, is what it looks like when a woman refuses to disappear. Just because disappearing would be more convenient for everyone else. That's the only inheritance that matters to me now.